since 9/11, we haven't had a 9/11 scale attack in our country. The counterterrorism apparatus, it's been clunky. It kept us safe, and so that was the main point. And the FIFA World Cup next year, and the 250th anniversary of our country. Bad guys are looking to do bad things in our country, and the people who are the experts are either fired or they're working on immigration enforcement. We are completely blind. If you recall the historic, I think it was Henry Stimson, he said, "Gentlemen do not read other gentlemen's mail," and that's why they closed the forerunner to the NSA. We are completely blind to disinformation, and that is scary. These people from DOJ and elsewhere in the administration just decided, well, for the DHS side, they installed a 23-year-old MAGA, sycophant who, his prior job to working at DHS was bagging groceries.
All right, welcome to the revolution, where you and I are starting a revolution together, and we don't really care what part of the political spectrum you're in. We just want to get our government back. Well, there was a person inside the government who didn't like how things were going, so he walked out. His name is Michael Duffin, and he's now running in Virginia's 8th Congressional District. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Cenk.
All right, so Michael, which State Department were you working for? Let's start there.
I worked in the Bureau of Counterterrorism on terrorism prevention for 9 years, and then I was one of the people, the 1,300 people who were part of the reduction and forced the RIF by DOJ on July 11th.
Okay, and you walked out with I believe a sign that said "Diplomacy matters, Feds matter." Is that right? And what did that mean to you?
I was frustrated. I'm still frustrated with the billionaires first foreign policy, where you have Jared Kushner and others going around the world with a tin cup asking foreign leaders to contribute to their business deals. And so the work that we have done or I did personally for 9 years on preventing terrorism, I still feel that it matters. And so that was a statement that this work will not be replaced by the contractors that DOJ or others, the administration hires, and it's not replaced by this parachute diplomacy where Trump's business buddies just swoop in and try and make a deal. That's not going to last. By the time that they get back to Washington, the deal has fallen, the piece has fallen apart. We've seen this.
Yeah. So you worked on white supremacy. You almost got fired by Kash Patel before.
It was during the first Trump administration. The story is Rich Grenell, as you know, he was our ambassador to Germany. And I did some exchanges between US and German mayors, and the German mayors really wanted to do more activity, exchange best practices with US mayors on white supremacy. So I submitted a proposal to our embassy, and Rich Grenell contacted Kash Patel. And thankfully at that time, there were guardrails where people like that were not allowed to fire nonpartisan subject matter experts like me. But obviously, that's not the case with Trump 2.0.
Yeah, so I want to come back to why they were, want to fire people like you. But what do you think was happening with DOJ overall? So you were kind of a victim of DOJ in a sense. So what do you think their actual agenda was?
It was to send a message. Certainly they weren't trying to save money. They sent a lot of our taxpayer money to Argentina. So that was not, cost savings was not on the agenda. It was, they wanted to, all the subject matter experts at the State Department, the 1,300 of us, when we were fired, it let everyone know if you step out of line, you're gonna get the hook. And so some people have said, well, 1,300 out of 70,000 plus people, that's not a lot. But the reality is we were like the scouts, the quarterbacks, the brain of the State Department. And we were the ones who told our embassies overseas about what to look for, because they're like, in terms of counterterrorism, they're not subject matter experts. So we told them what questions to ask foreign governments. We would have, I traveled overseas often, did assessment trips in partnership with USAID. And in terms of our intelligence, a lot of people don't know that the agencies like CIA, the National Counterterrorism Center, they rely on embassy reporting. So if we're not telling our embassies what to report on, then the intelligence community isn't getting as much information. And it's not all secret squirrel stuff. It's a lot of conversations about what's going on in your government, or who are these bad guys who are organizing outside of the embassy, and what are their intentions?
So that's strange, Michael. I actually haven't heard that part of the story before. So why fire the guys who are the biggest experts on terrorism and the subject matter experts? You would think that those would be the most valuable. So why target them, do you think?
I'm happy to criticize Democrats, and I'm happy to say good things about Republicans when they do good things. And so in the first Trump administration, they really prioritize counterterrorism. And so it was my thinking that the people that I had worked with directly were going to come back, or people like them would come back. And it was a head scratcher for me. And we even thought that Sebastian Gorka, with all of his shenanigans, he would want to work with us. We had ideas about how we could equitably partner with him. But Doge came with their laptops, their spreadsheets, and they basically took a pound of flesh from each bureau at the State Department, including counterterrorism. And that was something that was a head scratcher for me, because everyone that I talked to across Washington said, well, you guys are gonna get spared. And obviously we didn't. And it wasn't just the two offices that were fired that worked on white supremacy. A lot of people older veterans felt compelled to take early retirement. And so my final point on your question is, since 9/11, we haven't had a 9/11 scale attack in our country. The counterterrorism apparatus, it's been clunky, but it kept us safe. And so that was the main point. And with the FIFA World Cup next year and the 250th anniversary of our country, bad guys are looking to do bad things in our country. And the people who are the experts are either fired or they're working on immigration enforcement.
Okay, Michael, you got me officially worried because I know why they fired all the top white collar crime experts at the IRS, the SEC, and so many organizations, because Trump likes white collar crime. He likes financial fraud. He's engaged in financial fraud a lot. A lot of his donors are engaged in financial fraud, and they're going to do a lot of crypto stuff. So that, to me, I get it. I understand why they do it. Now, when you tell me they fired mainly the counterterrorism guys, that makes me very worried.
It makes me worried too. And so the thing that I've said I've written several op-eds since I've been separated from the government. And one point that I've made several times is this work is not something you could just jump into if let's say you get a PhD from Harvard in terrorism studies. Working for the government, it has its quirks, and it takes several years to figure out what's going on. And when you listen to someone like Sebastian Gorka, who in 2025 is still talking about bin Laden, the porn stash. I mean, I've watched several interviews, I've been in meetings with him, and he constantly talks about it. It's just like he's been frozen since 2011. And so I and the people that I worked with, we actually understood how to mobilize other governments to do the right thing. For example, Syria and Iraq, we had tens of thousands of people around the world go there, and many women and children have been stuck in detention camps or camps in northeast Syria. And so we convinced governments to bring those people back, because the kids were watching, they were inundated with ISIS propaganda. So whatever your security concerns about a 10-year-old kid, it's better that they're back at their home in Kazakhstan or Belgium than it is them watching ISIS videos and being trained, groomed by ISIS fighters in northeast Syria.
Oh boy. So tell me what your particular specialty was within the State Department.
I developed prevention programs that were focused on communities that we deemed, or individuals that we deemed were vulnerable to radicalization, to violence. And I'll give you a domestic example. So the individual who allegedly shot the two National Guards people recently, he didn't enter this country radicalized. He had, I'm gonna speculate a little bit, and please bear with me, but probably had some difficulties in his life, and he had spent some time online, and there was plenty of ISIS propaganda there that radicalized him, that told him to do what he did. And so in empowering social workers, teachers, religious leaders, this is what you need to look for. A lot of people are in denial about the person next to them on the bus, or their friend. Oh, he's having a rough time. He'll snap out of it. And then they do what they do, just like the individual who drove the truck through the French Quarter on January 1st in New Orleans and killed 11 people. There are warning signs. People, their lives are falling apart, and people aren't born terrorists. It's just they fall in a rut a lot of times, and then they get exposed to this horrific propaganda that's online. That includes white supremacists.
I'm going to ask you kind of a question a little bit off the beaten path here.
Please.
So one of the things I worry about, but I don't know if I'm right to worry about it, is that when you have people who are vulnerable and who are online, and I don't say vulnerable in terms of sympathy, I just say it in terms of you see them reeling, they're going in the wrong direction. So sometimes they'll get egged on by radicals, from what I've read in the articles that cover some of these guys who wind up doing terrorism. Do they ever get egged on and radicalized by perhaps other governments or other folks that are not, that might be closer to state actors? Are you guys ever concerned about that?
Absolutely. So we funded a study that it was published in April of 2024, just over a year and a half ago, on how Russia has been manipulating, co-opting far-right groups. The study was focused on Europe, but I've seen this in the US too. And so, when the location on X of the users was revealed, and people who were so-called MAGA patriots were in Africa or in Central Asia or Europe, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there on the internet. And a country like China or Russia, they can stoke Islamophobia. They can encourage people to commit harm, and especially there was an example in Sweden where an Islamophobic person burned a Quran, and then that message, the video was amplified all across the Muslim world, and that could lead to deadly protests, and often it does. And so we've seen examples of, you don't need to be in the theater to shout fire to create the stampede anymore. You don't even need to be for the Kremlin. They don't even need Russians to do it. They could be Bulgarians, or they could be Nigerians, and they hide their footprints, their fingerprints. And so it's really hard to detect this. But here's a point that I want to make: that the Global Engagement Center, a sister office of mine, they were completely shut down earlier this year, and so we are completely blind. If you recall the historic, I think it was Henry Stimson, he said, "Gentlemen do not read other gentlemen's mail," and that's why they closed the forerunner to the NSA. We are completely blind to disinformation, and that is scary.
Interesting. Well, I mean, yeah. I don't want to derail the conversation, but there is one state actor who loves propaganda and does a lot of it in America, and that's Israel. And the reason I bring that up, Michael, is because if anyone wants us to be blind to propaganda coming from a different country, it would presumably be an ally, because we get it if the Russians or the Chinese are doing it. We're not overly surprised by that. But if we found that an ally was doing an enormous amount of propaganda and maybe egging people on here in America, that would cause a lot of trouble. And there are a lot of powerful people who wouldn't want that trouble.
Agreed, and that's why we need to have a better understanding. Americans, we're very gullible. A lot of people around the world are gullible to propaganda, but we often see a website and we think it's authentic, or an individual, especially influencers, they are incentivized to talk about a certain topic. And so they're not necessarily a KGB or an FSB agent, but if they're given $100 or a couple $100 to talk about, let's say Jill Stein, or how a political candidate, a Democrat or Republican, doesn't reflect their values, well, they're doing that for money.
Yeah. So, and I don't want folks at home thinking I picked it out of the blue. The reason I mentioned Israel in that context is because Michael mentioned the accounts in Nigeria and India, et cetera. And the ones that were the recent batches that were found were all mysteriously pro-Israel in Calcutta and in other Indian and Nigerian cities. But anyways, okay, so but again, it's not just any one country. Many do it, and now unfortunately we've let our guard down, which does scare me. So you also mentioned white supremacy. What was your work on white supremacy?
I started countering it in 2016, and we had to go on hiatus when Trump was elected the first time. But as more white supremacist attacks happened in Pittsburgh, in Christchurch, New Zealand, and elsewhere, it was really hard for them to ignore it. And the Congress held the Trump administration officials at the State Department, their feet to the fire. And so I was doing things very covertly, if you will, not like when I say secretively, but just focusing on countering hate and polarization, if you will, and not calling it white supremacist or Islamist violent extremism. And eventually, we just started doing it more openly, and the Trump administration officials bought into it. Obviously, not Kash Patel and Rich Grenell, but they focused on other things, and we were able to designate the Russian imperial movement, and we had robust programming. It wasn't, and this is a misconception that the Trump administration intentionally spreads, that this isn't about changing people's ideology. It's about people who are on a pathway to violence. So if you're a right winger, a far right person, or a far left person, and you want to commit harm, our programs are about ensuring that you're not harming yourself and harming someone, people around you. And so it's not about countering ideology, and that is what I'm concerned about with the national security strategy, and a lot of the executive orders that are coming out of the White House.
Yeah, I mean, we hope that our government functions in a way where you're not going around going, "Hey, I want to discriminate against people's opinions on whether they're just run-of-the-mill right wing, or they're all the way at white supremacists, or they're radical Muslim or radical anything group." You're trying to focus on, yes, but who's going to do violence?
Yeah, it really, the irony of them canceling our program and essentially zeroing out the counterpart, the domestic counterpart at the DHS. This initiative, it really got life under the first Trump administration. The DHS focused on a public health approach, and so that was the answer for engaging the advocacy groups that felt like some of the earlier programs were Islamophobic. And so instead of the counter argument to that was like, no, we're focusing on public health. And so community groups bought into this. And going back to your question about Diplomacy Matters, I helped develop this network, the Strong Cities Network, over a decade. And so I recruited dozens of cities around the world. And then it was disassembled overnight because of Doge. But there was domestically, DOJ supported a program, small cities, 10 small cities around the US. One of them was the community right next door to where Melissa Hortman and her husband were murdered in June. The program was canceled in the spring. And then we had a program on countering hate and polarization in Manchester in the UK. That our sponsorship was canceled. The conference happened in February, but then there was an attack on Jews on Yom Kippur back in September. So my point is that our programs are focused in the right areas, doing the right things, a do no harm approach. And these people from Doge and elsewhere in the administration just decided, well, for the DHS side, they installed a 23-year-old MAGA, sycophant who, his prior job to working at DHS was bagging groceries, and that was in ProPublica.
Wait, Michael, I want to go back to something you said there. Wait, you were tracking what exactly when they took you off, and then there was an attack against during Yom Kippur? When was that, and what were you tracking at the time?
We were working in partnership with the mayor's office of Greater Manchester in the United Kingdom because they had the Ariana Grande bombing in 2017. So ever since that attack, we'd been working closely with the city on countering hate and polarization. There was a conference in February our embassy in London was supposed to sponsor. They pulled the funding because just because Trump told us to cancel everything, or Doge told us to cancel everything. The conference happened, it was scaled down, but my point is that there was an attack later in the year where 2 members of the Jewish community were killed by someone who's radicalized. And we could have said, well, we had this program focused in the right areas. And so all of this work, all of this analysis, you're looking for a needle in a haystack with violent extremism and terrorism. And we were finding the needles in the haystack. And so them canceling it and firing me and other people, if it's not like flipping a switch where we could just go back, and even myself, I've been out of government service for 5 months. There's a lot that's happened since then that I'm not aware of. And so you can't just you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And unfortunately, even if there's an administration in 2029 that wants to bring this back, it took decades to get it right. Since 9/11, since September 12th of 2001, we've been trying to prevent the next 9/11.
All right, last couple of questions about that, and then I want to ask you about your campaign real quick. So if you had to pick one group that you were most concerned might do a domestic terrorist attack, and I understand you're guessing, obviously, and it doesn't mean that everybody in that group is guilty. I'm gonna throw out those normal caveats, but of the different groups that you guys tracked, what had you most concerned?
Two responses. First, in terms of the volume of people that are killed, ISIS Khorasan, they've proven that they can radicalize people to great effect. The places where they've had people either inspired or directed, those individuals have killed a lot of people in Europe and elsewhere. And then secondly, with white supremacists, they're not necessarily focused on killing a dozen or 24 people. They're focused on killing when I say the right people. The assassination of Melissa Hortman in Minnesota sent shockwaves. It was a chilling effect. And so when white supremacists know, just like with Marjorie Taylor Greene with the death threats that she has said that she's received, when people say they know where your kids are going to school at and they have details that are not easily available on the internet, I'm very concerned about that. And I'm also concerned with insider threats, people who are in security services. And this is not based on intelligence. This is just based on things I've observed over time, that people who are the personal, like in the Secret Service, who have access to the president or other high-level senior officials. If one person decides to go rogue, there was a case, Jane, in 2019 where a State Department official was outed. I knew the guy, I worked with him, and I had no idea if he was a Democrat or Republican, and I didn't know he was on far-right podcasts until he was outed by, I think it was ADL. But my point is that these are people who they hide the warning signs of their radicalization, and even experts like myself are not going to necessarily pick up on them. But they have access to weapons, they have access to senior level officials. And what's more valuable, taking out a high-level government official or killing 50 people? I would say it's the former.
Yeah. All right, that's scary stuff. All right, so tell me why you're running for Congress then.
When I was fired, I'm just dissatisfied with the system, and it's not just Republicans what the Trump administration's doing. It's Democrats who are not fighting, and I feel like we've been left, federal employees, people have been fired, people who were furloughed. We've lost our jobs, we've lost our healthcare. Homes in the DC area are not selling well, and so even if you want to escape, you're going to lose if you own a home, you're going to lose significant equity. And so I believe we need fighters in Congress. And I come from a working class background in Chicago. My father was a cop, my grandfather was a firefighter. And so I have always had political opinions, but just having been fired and presuming that members of Congress on the Democratic side would fight harder for us. Some have, but the ones in Virginia and the guy I'm running against, he hasn't. He's a 75-year-old who's worth over $100 million. He's been in office for over a decade. He's been in politics for since the 1980s. And accepting corporate money is just not part of, it's part of who he is, but it's not part of who I am.
Yeah, feels like you just described half the Democratic Party there. Okay, but so if you were in Congress when people like you were fired, what would you have done?
So what I've done since I've been fired, I've written op-eds in the Orlando Sentinel, the Columbus Dispatch. Granted, these are blue cities, but they're in red states. And so it's important for our elected officials to go on to talk to conservative media and in conservative media markets to talk about the importance of the government and why firing someone at the FDA or firing a scientist at the CDC is going to impact their lives. As you know, the F-35, its parts are made from hundreds of congressional districts. And so if there's talk of getting rid of that fighter jet, you're gonna have literally hundreds of representatives fighting to keep it. With the State Department, we come from all 50 states and territories, and yet when we work for the government, we're part of 6 or 8 congressional districts. It's critical that those representatives understand the value of us. And so in government, I know when you have you're having a meeting, you have 3 main points, and if something is the 5th or the 7th or the 10th priority, it's not going to be raised. And even if you have an opportunity to raise it, the person you're meeting with isn't going to view it seriously. And that's the problem with the guy I'm running against, Don Beyer. He has not prioritized federal employees. He's starting to pick up on my messaging and try to catch up or act like he's doing something. But we need to hold our politicians their feet to the fire. And as you've said on other shows, other interviews, where primaries are a healthy thing. With the Democrats, had Biden been forced to go through the primary process, we would have seen some of the flaws, and we would have been able to, the Democrats would have been able to react quicker to get a new candidate instead of waiting until June 27th, that debate last year, to talk about replacing him and then give Kamala Harris 100 days to run a presidential campaign. So I believe that competition is good. It's going to bring the best out of our candidates. And I think with the number, I am running in a district that's just it's borders DC. It has 76,000 federal employees. And so this is a huge issue to us, but also affordability for everyone. People who are getting college degrees. I had my student loans forgiven a couple years ago through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and also with paid parental leave, which I know is a big issue for you. I have a 1-year-old and a 7-year-old. When my 7-year-old was born, my wife didn't have any paid leave, so I had to donate some of my hours. I didn't get to really take off any time when my oldest was born, and then for the second kid, women and fathers, they get 480 hours from the government. That's not enough. You can't dump your kid off to daycare when they're 3 months old. And so we need to do better. And the fact that we're giving billions of dollars away to special interest groups who have membership at Mar-a-Lago, we have the money, we could do that. We could do universal health care. And so we just need people who are fighting. And my government experience, I know, just like the opposite, if Russ Vought is the wicked witch of the East, I'm the good witch who knows how the government works and can put, not things back together as they were, but in a better way, in a more, responsive to the needs of 2025 and beyond.
One last question about the layoffs that Doge did as it related to you. So what was your experience with Democrats at the time? So you get fired along with 1,300 people. These are people that definitely should not have been fired. Again, it's definitely not about cost cutting, because they said we were going to, for example, cut the Pentagon, and then they added $150 billion to the Pentagon, which wiped out all their savings. They couldn't find $35 billion in oil subsidies. Come on, had nothing to do with cost cutting, right? So you go to the Democrats, you go, okay, fight back. And what was I can see it from the outside, but I can't see it from the inside. From the inside, when you're that deeply affected by it, how much do you think the Democrats helped you in your fight back? And how much didn't they? And what was your sense of, whether it's psyched or disappointed at what happened?
I'll name the people who are stepping up. I'm part of a group of fired federal employees. We go to the Hill every Tuesday to lobby members of Congress. Elizabeth Warren and Chris Van Hollen have met with us a lot. And then the other people haven't. And when I reached out to my delegation to state, my case, when I was informed that I was being riffed, I got the chain letter response that their hands are tied, and it's like what Chris Van Hollen did for Abrego Garcia going down to El Salvador. It didn't free him, but it sent a message that he was fighting, and that's the fighting spirit is so important. And there are older members of Congress, old school Democrats, if you will, that say, well, it's our experience and we know how the government operates. The people who are really holding Republicans' feet to the fire are the younger members of the delegation, the Jasmine Crockett's, the Robert Garcias of the world, and so I want to be one of those people who's fighting back. My website's stuffinforva.com, and I want to be part of the change. I know how the government works or doesn't work, and I want to look Marco Rubio in the eyes and ask him why he fired us. And I want to be a sounding board for federal employees, because the guy I'm running against hasn't had in-person town halls, and it was just unresponsive. And if you were born into wealth, you don't have to work hard for your money. If you and I don't work hard for our money, we don't get paid. So we have to, we have to do what we can to make ends meet. But this is also for me about, like I said before, it's my neighbors are potentially losing their homes. People have lost their health care, and this is a major issue. This is an economic time bomb that has gone off in Northern Virginia and the DC area, and certain representatives understand that, and they're prioritizing this. They sense the urgency, but others don't. And that's why if you have to be the change that you want to see at the ballot box. If you go to vote and you think, oh, I don't like this guy or this person, well, run, and that's what I'm doing. I'm swimming upstream, competing against a guy who's comfortable accepting corporate money. And that's why it's important to establish a grassroots base, and to, I'm advocating for federal employees. And this is something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, so Duffin4va.com, and we'll put the link in the description box. And so no corporate PAC money for you?
No corporate PAC money, and I'm using, when I say the Trump playbook, in a good way. I'm telling the media my story, and that's spreading the word, and that levels the playing field. And I really appreciate you being able to allowing me to share my story with your viewers.
All right, and no foreign government money, AIPAC, Israeli lobby, or any other lobby?
No, and that's the benefit of former federal employees running for office. We've already gone through. I have the security clearance. I know that I'm not. When we travel overseas, we're not allowed to accept a gift more than $20. Not $2 billion in our startup fund, like Jared Kushner. And we know how to work with, just like you, with the example, talking to the late Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson and other people. We need to have dialogue with people we disagree with, because they may help us pass legislation that will help us get either banning corporate purchasing of housing, or the other things that are our priorities.
All right, sounds good. And I like the story of Elizabeth Warren and Chris Van Hollen helping behind the scenes. Chris Van Hollen's not getting enough credit. That brother's been working super hard, and he's kind of almost embarrassing the rest of the Senate. He seems to be doing more than the rest of them combined. So I appreciate you telling that story. I appreciate you getting involved and trying to fight back. Oh, actually, last thing. You're running for Congress, Virginia's 8th congressional district. Everybody check out Michael Duffin there. So Michael, if there was one thing you could do to fix the government, you're not just a member of Congress, you get special powers. You could fix this. What would it be?
Off the top of my head, term limits. If you can't impact change in Congress, for me, it's 12 years in the House and then 12 years in the Senate. We need a deeper bench with Democrats. And I come from Chicago, where Barack Obama, his first race for Congress, he lost by 30 points to an entrenched incumbent. Obama had good ideas. He didn't run a perfect campaign, but my point is that when you have people who are retiring or dying in office up on Capitol Hill, and I've seen this in person when we're going to lobby, and people who are barely coherent are representatives. It's like you need to make way for new voices. And in my case, I'm not asking him to politely step aside. I'm going to take his position, and that's why I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to any other media podcast that'll have me to spread this message about the importance of fighting for federal employees.
Well, I like that attitude. All right, Duffin4va.com. Thank you, brother. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Michael
sir.
Duffin, everybody.